We are very lucky to have with us live in the studios this morning Ari Kohn. Ari Kohn is Managing Director of the Post-Prison Education Program, and we're going to be talking about an event that the Post-Prison Education Program is sponsoring this coming Thursday, involving bringing Jesse Trentadue to the Seattle area to speak. Ari, thank you very much for coming and spending time with us this morning.
Thank you. Good morning.
So if you would begin, tell us briefly about the Post-Prison Education Program.
It's a nonprofit that was founded in 2005, which we help men and women coming out of prison to get into college, and that can be degree seeking or vo-tech, whatever they choose. And the idea is to help people build good lives and not go back to prison. And we've been really successful. And the last 7 years, we've had only 2 people recidivate. And that the DOC is currently reporting 44.3% of former prisoners returning to prison. And so we're real happy with a success rate of better than 98%. So it pretty much proves that if you offer people hope and opportunity, they'll grab it and put their lives together and do really well. So.
Very good. So you have an event coming up this Thursday. You're bringing attorney Jesse Trentadue to town. He's going to be talking about his brother, Kenneth Trentadue, who was murdered in an Oklahoma federal prison facility back in 1995. Is that correct?
Right, yeah.
So can you tell us about that?
Well, I mean, Jesse's going to talk. I think it's a multifaceted presentation. So he's going to talk about what happened with his brother and why. And in fact, what happened with his brother was Federal Bureau of Investigation agents and somebody described it, one of the media described it as a interrogation gone wrong, went into a cell and literally beat his brother Kenny Trentadue to death. And he'll talk about that and how the Bureau of Prisons and FBI claimed it was a suicide, but with help from the county medical examiner and medical evidence, it was pretty clear that it was just a murder. And but then he's also going to talk about the legal battle that's taken place since the murder, because we're really interested in having more attorneys in Washington and King County and Seattle be involved in 42 U.S.C. 1983 civil rights litigation. And so Jesse's battles on behalf of his brother's estate through the federal courts all the way up to the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals are a really great lesson on how civil rights litigation can work and be effective and can happen. So that's another aspect of it.
All right, so let's talk more about specifically Kenneth's story. Originally, you read an article in GQ back in 1995 that alerted you to this situation.
It was 96, and a friend handed me the GQ issue. I think it was November of 96, and said you should read this. And I read it, and I was blown away. It was almost like it was a feature cover story with GQ, and that 96 issue basically described Kenny Trentadue, Jesse's brother, as sort of a small-time, maybe I think I remember bank robber from California who probably was doing robberies because of heroin addiction, and he had a parole violation and or probation violation that resulted in him being transported by the Bureau of Prisons to the FTC Oklahoma City, which is Federal Transfer Center in Oklahoma City, and he had just gotten there within a day or two of the federal building being blown up by Timothy McVeigh, and the GQ article didn't report this. It was years later before it came out, but so at the time it was just like the BOP, the Bureau of Prisons, saying this was a suicide, and the medical examiner in Oklahoma City saying no, it was clearly a murder. I mean, one of the really damning things in my mind is they went into the cell with luminol, which is kind of an agent that detects the presence of blood, and you pretty much spray or put this luminol on the floors and the walls and the ceiling, and then you turn the lights off, and then you use ultraviolet light, and the cell lit up like a Christmas tree, showing blood had been all over floor, ceilings, walls, and
that was 4 months later when they did that.
Yeah, it was a while later when the medical examiner went in and did that, and it was after there was an orderly, so he would have been a prisoner who cleaned that cell, and it was and he apparently, according to testimony that he would have given in a trial had he not died, and some say probably was murdered to keep him from being testified, but I don't know. But anyway, he gave information that cell was just awash in blood, and that doesn't happen from somebody hanging themselves. And then and when you hang yourself, you don't end up with nearly every bone in your body from head to toe broken either, and bruises and contusions from head to toe. So that was pretty much the first GQ article. It was that this murder had taken place of this guy, and the BOP was calling it suicide, and the medical examiner was saying, "Hell no, it's clearly a murder." And then in '97, Mary Fisher, who was a senior writer for GQ at the time and who lost her job for writing these articles, I don't know if the FBI, I couldn't prove that the FBI got her fired, but she was fired by GQ sometime after the '97 article came out. But she wrote a follow-up, and again, it was a major feature article in the '97 GQ, and came out with more information. It was just pretty amazing to me that a federal prisoner could be beaten to death while in custody of the U.S. Department of Justice. It was pretty extraordinary. So that was my first encounter with the story, and I wrote to Jesse Trentadue, who's a Salt Lake City attorney. He's a former All-American. He's pretty much a very successful sports attorney, not involved in these kind of social justice issues at all, except for caring about his brother, and then his brother's murdered, and then he gets heavily involved. So I wrote to him, and we maintained a communication over the last almost 15 years now, I guess, and due to other events and more recent publicity early this year, asked him if he would come to town and speak at town hall. So.
All right. So getting back to some of the specifics that were brought out in those first couple articles, so he had been multiple phone calls to his family in two days before he was murdered. Everything seemed fine.
Right.
And then his mom gets a call 2 days later saying, your son has committed suicide, and we'd be happy to pay for the autopsy and have him cremated for you.
Right. It was very clearly if you go back and it's what, by the way, one of the interesting things, you can almost find anything on the internet. We have not been able to find these two GQ articles on the internet. What we had to do was go back and buy copies from GQ, hard copies, and make Xerox copies. And whenever we want to show the story to somebody, we have to actually give them Xerox copies. If you Google these articles, you just can't find them. They're not online, and I think that's because of government intervention. But anyway, they very clearly wanted to cremate the body, and that would have destroyed the evidence, and have only an autopsy that the U.S. Department of Justice, Federal FBI, Bureau of Prisons had done, and it wouldn't have shown all the data that came out when the medical examiner, the Oklahoma City medical examiner, did the autopsy, and there was some commotion and really fast moving to keep that cremation from happening. But it happened, and if it had not happened, I mean, if he'd been cremated, this story, we wouldn't be here today. We wouldn't be having this conversation. Jesse Trentadue wouldn't have been able to sue on behalf of his brother's estate, and we just wouldn't be having this discussion.
So they manage to keep his body from being cremated. It gets sent home, and the family, anticipating something has happened at the prisons there, is when they open the coffin, was his brother that had a camera ready to go then, and they were shocked at how badly the body was bruised all over, including like the soles of his feet were beaten. Yeah,
it was. They were horrified when the family, when they saw, and you see GQ has pictures. They've got pictures of the medical examiner. They've got pictures of Kenny in the casket. They've got pictures of Kenny at the morgue. So there's plenty of photographs available of his body, and in fact there was the town hall event Thursday evening is going to be opened by the original CNN news story on this, which was 1995, and from that point forward, people were talking about murder. It was just obvious. It was really obvious that this was not a suicide. You don't hang yourself from some device in a ceiling and
in a facility that's specifically designed to prevent suicides.
It's just you don't end up with blood on four walls, the ceiling, and the floor. You don't end up with every bone in your body broken. You don't end up with bruises and contusions from head to toe. And at one point, Jesse actually got a phone call from somebody that really alerted him to this, and the phone call was just. Told him that this was an interrogation gone wrong, and that was the first hint that led to the sort of the second phase of what happened, and that it was tied to that the FBI clearly thought that Kenny Trentadue was this John Doe 2. There were 24 witnesses. This is one of the neat things about the BBC investigative report, which showed worldwide except for in the United States. I thought that was so interesting. The BBC was able to put this 58-minute report out all over the world, all over Europe, all over Asia, but not in the United States. It was not allowed to be shown in the United States. And but they talked in there about 24 witnesses saw two people in that truck. So one person plus McVeigh. And the FBI, and that second person was the John Doe, because they pretty quickly arrested McVeigh, and then it came out that people thought that the FBI thought that Kenny Trentadue might be that John Doe that 24 people had seen, and his description, I mean, his body size and everything, hair color and everything, fit almost perfectly what these 24 witnesses were saying they saw in the truck with McVeigh. So anyway, interrogation gone wrong.
They thought his description fit the description of a person named Richard Guthrie. Is that right?
Yeah, who turned out to be active military. I mean, when this happened, which brings up another interesting subject is, Jesse keeps trying to find out the why behind why his brother was murdered. And so he's done all this FOIA, Freedom of Information Act litigation. So it'll be like you file a request under FOIA, you get the information. In his case, sometimes 2/3 of what he's asked for is redacted. Then sometimes people just say okay, and they take what they've gotten and they forget the rest. But he's been so passionate about his brother's murder that he would pursue it in federal court. And then the feds have to come in and explain, well, to a federal judge, why didn't you, why did you redact all this information? And then there's an argument about you have to give it to us, and the feds are saying, no, we don't, and this is a national security issue, and blah, 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 blah. And it was in those FOIA battles in federal court where Jesse learned about lots of other things, including this, to me, really scary program, or I don't know what you call it, but it's PATCON, PATCON, all caps. And so one of the latest go-rounds in federal court where Trentadue was in court saying they didn't give us this information, and then the feds are saying, well, that's national security and it involves this PATCON program, and PATCONs ends up being where the feds have people, like in the old days when I was a kid in the 50s and 60s, they would infiltrate the Ku Klux Klan, which to me was a wonderful thing to do. But now in this PATCON program, they're infiltrating not only the crazy groups, white supremacists and still the KKK presumably, but they're planning people in federal judges' offices, in congressional offices, in national media. There was recently a story that some senior vice president, I think with NBC, turns out to be a PATCON operative. And these people don't just spy and report back under the PATCON program. They induce people to do things that are illegal. And there's actually a training manual for PATCON. I mean, the feds, Department of Justice, they have a training manual on what people are supposed to do and how they're supposed to do it. And so there's now a discussion, or there's been a discussion, that this John Doe 2 actually was a PATCON operative, and that the feds had advanced knowledge that this federal building in Oklahoma City was going to be blown up, and they had that knowledge through this PATCON operative who might have been this military guy that you just named. But in any case, it's now gone way beyond Kenny being murdered, and there's discovery being withheld, and the feds saying there's these I drives and S drives. So like if you file for discovery, or Jesse files for discovery on some issue and doesn't get what he knows they have or what he thinks they have, and then they end up in federal court, and you end up with the feds saying, well, Your Honor, he's right. We didn't give him that, but it wasn't in the main file that we had segregated that information that we didn't give him over here on these I drives and these S drives, which is pretty scary. Like if you think you were a defendant, for example, in a criminal case and you were being prosecuted, just to put it on a personal level, and your defense attorney files for discovery from the prosecution, and let's say it was a federal case, so it files with the U.S. Attorney's Office for discovery, and the U.S. Attorney doesn't give you all the information. You might not get exculpatory information that could keep you from being found guilty, keep you from going to prison, because the feds think it's okay for them to have a main file, which they consider to be discoverable, but over here have stuff that they don't want discovered, which they deemed to not be pertinent over in these I drives and S drives, and just completely segregated and put off to the side. So now there's not only the issue of the murder of a man in federal custody, where you really should argue that if there's any place safe in the world, it should be when you're in federal custody in a federal prison in a segregated cell. But it's now this PATCON program and how the feds have chosen to segregate data and say, okay, this is discoverable and this isn't, and so on and so forth. And what we hope the town hall event will do, I hope we have a lot of attorneys attend or students who are aspiring to be attorneys, because it's a big part of the talk will be about civil rights litigation, 42 U.S.C. 1983 civil rights litigation, and Jesse's had 17 years now of pursuing that through the federal courts all the way up to the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals and on different issues. And so I think people learning how that plays out and what they can accomplish is just incredibly important. And not just on the federal level. Just a couple of years ago, it became public knowledge that two women at the Washington State Department of Corrections had been repeatedly sexually assaulted by the same 4 or 5 employees of the Department of Corrections at the Women's Correctional Center down in Gig Harbor. And the grievance system that's available to prisoners did not work. They kept filing grievances, and the DOC kept doing nothing, and which is reprehensible to an extent I can't even put words to. And so finally one of these women was released, and she found her way to Columbia Legal Services, and this amazing lawyer, Beth Colgan, along with another lawyer from the Public Interest Law Group, brought a lawsuit against the DOC. And the DOC ended up writing a check for $1 million, plus making taking remedial action at the prison in Gig Harbor to make it be so that there's hopefully no place down there where a DOC employee can take a prisoner and sexually assault them without being seen. And so, we'll have, the civil rights litigation is important on a state level. It's important on our daily lives, and I hope all that will be presented really well at Town Hall.
It says something right there that the state's response to this is that we need to increase the number of surveillance cameras to make it so that our employees aren't sexually assaulting those we are taking care of for extended periods of time.
Yeah, and we it says a lot, and in two ways. The Charles Epp, a professor at the University of Kansas, wrote a book called "Making Rights Real," where he talks about the importance of civil rights litigation and how effective it can be. And so, with the lawsuit that Beth Colgan brought, or Columbia Legal Services and Beth, and Hank Balsam from PILG brought against DOC, there's the monetary side, but then there's the other side is that the DOC had to make corrective action. They had to put cameras in. They had to fix it so hopefully that wouldn't happen again. And by the way, we're going to have we've got a small panel of 4 people, includes Dean Niles from CLU Law School, but we've got one of our students who was raped while in DOC custody. So a woman who came out of Gig Harbor, and by the way, she's a straight A 4.0 GPA student at Green River Community College, has already been accepted at UW, is being published by Harvard University. But when she came out of the prison in Gig Harbor, she went to Rapp Lincoln Work Release Center in Tacoma, and she was raped there. She was taken by a supervisory person back into a stock room, and the guy locked the door and raped her. And nothing ever happened to him. Nothing. Pierce County doesn't, as a matter of policy, doesn't prosecute PREA cases. And the DOC's investigation was pretty much, they called the rapist and said, "Did you rape her?" And he, of course, said no, and that was it. And so there's been no justice there. And if the statute of limitations hadn't run, we would be seeing justice on that because I would pay for it.
What is a PREA case?
Well, it's rape. It's prison rape, and what happened. One of the corrective things that the DOC had to do after the sexual assault case that was brought by Beth Colgan was they actually hired somebody. They created, in essence, a department. Or they may have had the department, but anyway, if they had it, they built it up. And this is a department at DOC headquarters in Tumwater that lets prisoners know about their rights when it comes to sexual assaults from other prisoners or DOC staff or whatever, and also educates staff about what they're supposed to do and what they're not supposed to do and what's right and what's wrong. And so that's what it is. It's covers sexual assault and rape in prisons.
Oh, we've only got a few minutes left. Your post-prison education program, do you have many of your students pursuing degrees to become lawyers and fix the very system that they went through?
We've got one graduate of the program, Vance Bartley, who works as a paralegal for 2 law firms very effectively. And we're trying to talk him into going to law school. The one person that's absolutely pursuing it is Lizzie Reed, who's the student who was raped at the Work Release Center in Tacoma. And I'm absolutely positive that she'll be a lawyer.
All right. We are talking with Ari Kohn. He is the director of the post-prison education program. And again, we've been talking about the case of Kenneth Trentadue and his brother, who is coming to town this Thursday.
Yeah, this Thursday, the town hall at 8th and Seneca in Seattle. There's, I think, the presentation. The doors open at 6 or 6:30. We'll start the presentation at 7:30. It'll be a 45-minute presentation, and then 45 minutes of Q&A, and then close at 9.
All right, and. So in addition to the event coming up this week, you guys also have a website that people can turn to?
Yeah, our website is www.postprisonedu.org. You can just Google Post-Prison Education Program, and the top link you'll get instantly is ours, and post-prison is hyphenated. And people who want information on this town hall event are free to email me, and especially attorneys who might be interested in pursuing civil rights litigation. And my email is ari.kohn@postprisonedu.org, and that's on our website. Ari is A-R-I, Kohn is K-O-H-N, so ari.kohn@postprisonedu.org.
And is this event a CLE event?
We wanted it to be a CLE, and things moved too fast, and it ended up not being. But hopefully, we can have a subsequent event that will be a CLE for attorneys in Washington, and bring Jesse back from Salt Lake City to be one of the teachers at that CLE event.
Very good. Well, with that, we are unfortunately out of time. I want to thank you very much for coming in and spending time with us this morning.
Thank you.